Dad, something's wrong. Lily's voice came through the phone thin and unsteady, as if every word cost her courage. She was whispering, careful, afraid the sound itself might travel beyond the small space where she was hiding. Jonathan Stone didn't hesitate. He was awake now, fully, the fog of sleep gone in an instant. He sat up on the edge of the hotel bed, spine straight, feet planted on the floor, the way he did when a meeting turned serious. "Lily," he said quietly, firmly. "I'm here. Take a breath for me." There was a soft, shaky inhale on the other end of the line. "That's it," he continued, slowing his own voice on purpose. "You're safe right now. No one can hear you through this phone. I need you to stay calm and tell me exactly what happened. Start from the beginning." She swallowed. "I woke up," Lily said. "I had to go to the bathroom." "Good," Jonathan said. "Go on." "It was dark," she continued. "I didn't turn on the lights. I was being quiet." "You're doing great," he said, steady and reassuring. "What did you see?" "The door to your room was open," Lily whispered. "Just a little." Jonathan's jaw tightened, but his tone didn't change. "And who was there?" "Victoria." The name landed between them, heavy and unmistakable. "All right," Jonathan said calmly. "Tell me what she was doing." Lily hesitated, then forced the words out as if afraid they might disappear if she waited too long. "She was at your desk. She had a small black thing in her hand. She put it into your computer." Jonathan closed his eyes for a brief moment. A flash drive. There was no doubt in his mind. "You didn't go into the room?" he asked. "No," Lily said quickly. "I know I'm not allowed. I stayed in the hallway." "That was the right choice," he said. "What happened next?" "She talked on the phone," Lily said, very quiet, but she sounded mad. "Not like when she talks to me." Jonathan felt a slow, cold pressure build in his chest, but his voice remained even. "Did she say anything else?" "She said, 'You don't listen to children,'" Lily whispered. "She laughed when she said it." Jonathan's fingers curled tightly around the phone. "Did she see you?" he asked. "I don't think so," Lily replied. "I went back to my room very slowly. I stayed awake for a long time." "You did exactly what you should have done," he said. "You stayed quiet and you stayed safe." There was a pause. Then Lily spoke again. In the morning, Jonathan didn't interrupt. He knew better. She smiled. Lily said, "She told me sometimes kids dream things when they wake up at night. She said I shouldn't worry you because you have important work." Lily's voice wavered. "She asked me if I wanted you to be mad at me." Jonathan felt something sharp and unmistakable settle into place. This was no misunderstanding. This was control. "What did you say?" he asked gently. "I said no," Lily whispered. "So she hugged me. And she said, 'Good girls don't make trouble.'" Jonathan stood and walked toward the window, the city lights far below blurring as his focus narrowed to one thing only. "Lily," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "Listen to me very carefully. You did nothing wrong. Do you understand that?" There was silence, then a small voice. "Yes, I believe you," he said without hesitation. Every word. Her breath caught on the other end of the line. "I need to ask you a few more things," he continued. "Are you alone right now?" "Yes," Lily said. "I'm in my room. The door is locked." "Good," Jonathan said. "Keep it locked. Do not open it for anyone. Not for Victoria. Not for anyone else. Only me. Can you do that?" "Yes," she said, stronger now. "Is your phone hidden?" he asked. "Yes." "Good," he repeated. "If anything changes, if you hear her outside your door, if she says anything to you, you call me immediately, no matter the time." "Okay." Jonathan glanced at his watch. Midnight was long past. The meeting in the morning no longer existed in his mind. "I'm coming home," he said simply. There was a pause. Then Lily asked, "Right now?" "Yes," he said. "Right now. Are you angry?" she asked quietly. Jonathan's reflection stared back at him from the glass, controlled, composed, and very far from calm inside. I'm not angry at you, he said. I'm proud of you for telling me. Another shaky breath. Okay, Lily said. I want you to lie down, he instructed. Stay in your room. I'll be there as soon as I can. The call ended. Jonathan stood still for a moment, the silence of the room pressing in around him. There was no confusion now, no room for doubt or delay. A child had seen something she was never meant to see, and she had been told to question herself for it. That alone was enough. He moved quickly, dressing without thought, canceling calls with a few short messages. As he left the hotel, and the night air hit his face, one truth echoed clearly in his mind. When a child whispers the truth, the danger isn't in the words. It's in the adults who choose not to listen. And this time he was listening. By the time Jonathan Stone's jet lifted off the private runway, the night had begun to thin at the edges. The sky was still dark, but it no longer felt endless. From the small oval window, he watched the city lights shrink into scattered constellations, then disappear altogether beneath the clouds. He did not sleep. He sat with his jacket folded beside him, hands loosely clasped, posture rigid, not from tension, but from focus. For years, this was how he prepared before hostile takeovers, before testimony, before decisions that could ruin other men. Calm on the surface, every sense turned inward. But this was different. This was his house, his child. He replayed Lily's words again and again, not searching for holes, not doubting her memory, but mapping the sequence the way he mapped timelines in court. Wake up. Hallway. Door ajar. Victoria at the desk. A small black device. A phone call. Then the morning conversation. The soft warning wrapped in concern. Good girls don't make trouble. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He had grown up learning how adults disguised threats as lessons. His father had been a man who believed fear built character. His mother had believed silence kept the peace. Jonathan had learned early that power rarely raised its voice. It whispered, leaned close, and convinced you that resistance was your own failure. Somewhere below the jet, the country rolled past unseen. He checked his phone again. No missed calls, no messages. Lily had stayed quiet, just as he had told her to. The thought brought him relief and guilt in equal measure. She should not have had to be brave. When the plane began its descent, dawn was just beginning to color the horizon. Pale light spread slowly, indifferent to urgency. Jonathan watched it without appreciation. There were moments in life when beauty felt almost offensive. The car was waiting when he landed. He didn't speak to the driver beyond a brief nod. The gates of the property appeared sooner than expected, tall and black, opening smoothly at his approach. The house beyond them sat exactly as it always had, clean lines, warm lights, the careful illusion of safety. Nothing looked wrong. That was what made it dangerous. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and citrus cleaner. Early morning quiet pressed in from all sides. Jonathan set his bag down without a sound and moved through the ground floor slowly, taking in details he had once considered insignificant. A chair slightly out of place, a door not fully closed, the subtle signs of a space used by someone who believed they belonged there unquestioned. Victoria stood at the kitchen counter, her back to him, dressed impeccably in soft gray. She looked exactly as she always did at this hour, composed, domestic, unhurried. When she turned and saw him, her surprise seemed genuine. "Jonathan," she said, eyes widening, smile forming instantly. "You're home early." "Yes," he replied evenly. Plans changed. She crossed the room to him, reaching up to kiss his cheek. He let her. He noted the light scent of her perfume, the ease of her touch, the way her eyes flicked past him briefly as if checking something behind his shoulder. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," he said. "Where's Lily?" Victoria didn't hesitate. "Still asleep." I was going to wake her soon for school. Jonathan nodded. I'll get her. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She can sleep a little longer. She's been restless. I'll get her, he repeated, still calm. He didn't wait for a response. He took the stairs 2 at a time, every step measured. At the top, he paused outside Lily's door and knocked softly twice, the signal they had agreed on long ago. "It's me," he said quietly. The lock clicked almost immediately. The door opened just wide enough for Lily to look out. Her eyes were tired, shadows beneath them darker than they should have been on a 6-year-old's face. When she saw him, something in her posture loosened. He crouched down to her level without thinking. "Hey," he said, "you did exactly what I asked." "I'm here." She nodded, then stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. He held her carefully, feeling how light she was, how tightly she clung. "It's okay," he murmured. "You're safe." She didn't answer, but she didn't pull away either. When he stood, holding her hand, Victoria was already at the top of the stairs. She watched them with a pleasant expression that did not reach her eyes. "I didn't realize you'd be home so early," she said again. "Lily, sweetheart, you should have told me you were awake." Lily's fingers tightened around Jonathan's. "She did," Jonathan said. "She told me." The silence that followed was brief but telling. Victoria's smile returned slower this time. "I'm not sure what you mean." "We'll talk later," Jonathan said. "After school." He guided Lily past her, down the stairs into the kitchen. He made breakfast himself. Toast, eggs, a glass of orange juice, ordinary things, anchors. Lily ate quietly, but she finished every bite. "Do you want me to walk you to the car?" Victoria asked, adjusting her jacket. "No," Jonathan said, "I will." He didn't look at her when he spoke. He didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the room, the recalculation happening behind her eyes. At the door, Lily looked back once. Victoria smiled and waved. Jonathan closed the door behind them. The drive to school was silent at first. The streets were waking up slowly. People heading to work, children being hurried along sidewalks by distracted parents. Normal life. The kind that allowed things to hide in plain sight. "Dad," Lily said finally. "Yes." "Is she mad at me?" Jonathan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No," he said, "she's not mad at you. And even if she were, that wouldn't matter. Adults don't get to scare children into silence ever." Lily stared out the window. "She said you wouldn't believe me." Jonathan glanced at her, then back at the road. "I believe you." That more than anything else seemed to settle something in her. If this moment touched you, please like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you are watching from and subscribe to the channel for more stories that stand up for truth and quiet courage. When he dropped her off, he watched until she was safely inside the building. Only then did he exhale fully for the first time since the call. As he drove away, his calm hardened into resolve. He had listened. Now he would act, and whatever Victoria Lane believed she was entitled to. She had underestimated one thing above all else. He was no longer just protecting his interests. He was protecting his daughter. Jonathan Stone returned to the house alone. The silence inside felt different now. Not peaceful, not neutral, but alert. As if the walls themselves had learned to listen. He closed the door behind him without a sound, and stood still for a moment, letting his senses adjust. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of a clock. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked as the house settled. Victoria was in the living room, seated with perfect posture on the sofa, tablet resting lightly in her hands. She looked up as he entered, her expression warm, composed, rehearsed by years of social instinct. "Everything all right at school?" she asked. "Yes," Jonathan said. "Lily's fine." He took a seat across from her, not beside her. He noticed the detail immediately. The way her shoulders shifted just a fraction, recalibrating distance. I didn't expect you back until tomorrow, she said. You should have told me you were coming. I wanted to see things as they were, he replied evenly. Victoria smiled. You make it sound ominous. Do I? He asked. She tilted her head, studying him now. The way she studied people when she thought they were hiding something. You seem tired. I am, Jonathan said, but not confused. That landed. Victoria set the tablet aside slowly. What's this about, Jonathan? He didn't answer immediately. He stood and walked past her toward the hallway, then stopped at the foot of the stairs. I need to check my study. Her voice followed him, light but firm. Now, yes, I can make coffee, she offered. We can talk after. We're talking now, he said, already moving. Upstairs, the door to his study was closed. It always was. He unlocked it and stepped inside, closing it behind him with deliberate care. The room looked untouched at first glance. Books aligned, desk cleared, monitor dark, order preserved. Appearances meant nothing. He turned on the computer. The system booted quickly. He navigated without hesitation, fingers steady, eyes sharp. It took less than a minute to find what he was looking for. An unfamiliar access point, a timestamp from the night before. A device registered that did not belong to him. He stared at the screen, not surprised, not relieved, only resolved. There was a knock at the door. Jonathan. Victoria's voice closer now. Is everything all right? He closed the laptop and turned. When he opened the door, she stood there smiling. Concern carefully measured. You shouldn't worry so much, she said gently. Stress does things to people. So does manipulation, he replied. The smile faltered just barely. What are you implying? She asked. I'm not implying, he said. I'm confirming. They stood facing each other in the hallway. The distance between them no longer intimate but adversarial. Victoria crossed her arms. An old habit. One she used when conversations turned inconvenient. Lily told you something, she said. Jonathan didn't react. Yes, she's a sensitive child. Victoria continued smoothly. She imagines things, especially when she's tired. She described your actions in detail, Jonathan said accurately. Victoria exhaled softly as if disappointed. You're choosing to believe a child over me. I'm choosing to believe the truth, he replied. And the truth is you accessed my private files without permission. Her eyes hardened. I'm your fiancé. You're not my partner in business, he said. Silence stretched between them. Then Victoria laughed quietly, humorlessly. You know, she said. I wondered how long it would take before you noticed. Jonathan studied her face, seeing it clearly now. Not the charm, not the polish, but the calculation underneath. You underestimate me, she went on. You built everything. You have by being ruthless. I simply did what needed to be done more efficiently. And scaring a child was part of that, he asked. She wasn't scared, Victoria said sharply. She was curious. And curiosity is dangerous in children who don't know their place. Jonathan felt something cold settle into his chest. My daughter's place, he said slowly, is safety. Victoria shook her head. You made her a symbol, a gesture. You didn't think through the consequences. Get out, Jonathan said. Her eyes widened slightly. You don't mean that. I do, he said. Pack your things. Leave the house. And what will you tell people? She asked. That your perfect future fell apart because of a bedtime story. I'll tell them the truth, he said. Or nothing at all. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, then straightened. You're making a mistake. No, Jonathan said. I already made one. This is me correcting it. She turned without another word and walked toward the bedroom. Jonathan listened as drawers opened, suitcases dragged free. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. When the front door finally closed behind her, the house exhaled. Jonathan remained where he was for a long time. The weight of what had almost happened settling slowly. He thought of Lily in her classroom, learning letters, trusting that the world made sense because the adults around her told her it did. He pulled out his phone and typed a single message to his security team, then another to his legal counsel. Then he went downstairs and sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, waiting. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he stood to lose. He was thinking about what he had nearly failed to protect. And he knew this was only the beginning. Lily sensed the change before anyone told her. It wasn't something she could name or explain. It was in the way the house felt when she came home from school that afternoon. Quieter, but not the quiet that made her nervous. This quiet felt like when a storm had passed and the air hadn't decided what to do next. Jonathan was waiting at the gate himself. Not the driver, not security, him. Lily spotted him through the car window and her shoulders relaxed without her realizing it. He stood with his hands in his coat pockets, posture straight, eyes fixed only on the car. When the door opened, she climbed out and walked straight to him. He knelt immediately, meeting her at eye level. "Hey," he said softly. She searched his face the way children do when they're checking for danger. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Jonathan said at once. "You're not. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." He said it slowly, clearly, as if he needed her to hear every word and keep it somewhere safe. "Did I do something bad?" she asked. "No," he repeated. "You did something brave." The word felt strange in Lily's ears. Brave was for people in books. Knights, heroes, not kids who whispered into phones from closets. "Oh," she said. He stood and took her hand as they walked inside. The front door closed behind them, and Lily noticed something immediately. Victoria's shoes were gone. She stopped walking. "Where is she?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. He guided her into the living room and sat with her on the couch. Not too close, not too far. He thought carefully before speaking, the way he did when explaining things that mattered. "She doesn't live here anymore," he said. Lily's heart skipped. "Because of me?" "No," he said firmly. "Because of her choices." She stared at her hands. "She said I made things difficult." Jonathan leaned forward slightly. "Lily, listen to me. When adults do something wrong, it's not a child's job to make it easier for them. It's their job to stop." She absorbed that in silence. "Are you mad at her?" Lily asked. "I'm disappointed," Jonathan said. "And I'm angry about what she did, but I'm glad you told me." Lily nodded slowly, as if storing the information away for later when she might need it again. They stayed there for a while, the afternoon light stretching across the floor. Jonathan let her talk about school, about a drawing she'd made, about a boy who sat too close during reading time, ordinary things. He listened to every word. Later, when Lily went upstairs to change, Jonathan remained in the living room, his phone vibrating quietly beside him. Messages from lawyers, security updates, timelines forming, consequences unfolding. He read them all. He responded to none. Instead, he stood and walked through the house again, slower this time, not searching for threats, but for understanding. He noticed how easily access had been granted, how many decisions he had delegated without question, how often he had mistaken presence for protection. In his study, he opened the laptop again. This time he went deeper. The access logs told a story that was methodical, patient, and arrogant. Files reviewed but not altered. Copies made quietly. Financial data, legal strategies, the kind of information that could be used to influence him without his knowledge. Victoria hadn't been careless. She had been confident. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, the weight of it settling over him. He thought of the way she had spoken to Lily. The calm certainty, the assumption that a child's word would never matter enough to disrupt her plans. She had been right about one thing. Most of the time, it wouldn't have. That evening, Lily ate dinner with him at the kitchen table. No formal setting. No staff hovering. Just pasta, bread, and a glass of milk she spilled slightly when she reached too fast. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, eyes wide. Jonathan handed her a napkin. "It's okay," he said. "Spills happen." She wiped it carefully. Victoria didn't like spills. Jonathan didn't respond to that. He filed it away with all the other small things that now felt much bigger. After dinner, he walked Lily upstairs himself. He checked the locks. He checked the windows, not because he thought danger waited outside, but because he wanted her to see him do it. "Will you read tonight?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said. He sat beside her bed and read until her breathing slowed and evened out. When he finished, he closed the book, but didn't get up right away. "Dad," Lily murmured, half asleep. "Yes. Next time something feels wrong. Can I tell you again?" Jonathan swallowed. "Always." She nodded and turned onto her side, comforted by the certainty in his voice. When he left her room, Jonathan stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet of the house. It no longer felt watchful. It felt wounded, but healing. Downstairs, his phone buzzed again. A message from his attorney, short and precise. There would be consequences. Public ones, private ones. Victoria Lane would not disappear quietly. Jonathan stared at the screen, then turned it face down on the counter. Whatever came next, he would face it differently than before. Because now he knew something he had forgotten. Power did not protect children. Attention did. The first call came just after midnight. Jonathan was sitting alone in the study. The lights dimmed. The house wrapped in a stillness that felt earned rather than imposed. Lily was asleep upstairs. He had checked twice. Old habits, he told himself, though he knew better. Some habits were born from fear, others from responsibility. The phone vibrated softly against the desk. Unknown number. He didn't answer it right away. He watched the screen light up, go dark, then light up again. Persistence was a language he understood well. When he finally picked up, he didn't speak first. "Jonathan," Victoria's voice said, smooth and familiar. Stripped of the pleasant warmth she used in public. "You're overreacting." He closed his eyes briefly. "This conversation isn't happening." "Of course it is," she replied. "You just don't like how it makes you feel." He hung up. The phone vibrated again almost immediately. This time, he turned it face down. Jonathan stood and walked to the window. The property stretched out below, dark and quiet, trees lining the drive like silent witnesses. He had spent years building defenses against hostile competitors, against lawsuits, against governments that wanted their share. He had not prepared for this kind of intrusion, the kind that wore familiarity like armor. Behind him, the laptop screen glowed faintly. He returned to the desk and opened a new file, one he rarely needed. A full forensic review, access points, external transfers, patterns. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger clouded judgment. He was methodical. By morning, he had confirmation of what he already knew. The copied files weren't random. They were targeted. Legal vulnerabilities, pending acquisitions, documents that, in the wrong hands, could pressure him into decisions he would never knowingly make. Victoria hadn't planned to destroy him. She had planned to steer him. At breakfast, Lily sat across from him, swinging her legs slightly under the table. She was quieter than usual, watching him with careful eyes. "Did I do something bad again?" she asked suddenly. Jonathan looked up from his coffee. "Why would you think that?" She shrugged. "You look serious." He set the mug down. "I'm thinking. That's all." Lily nodded, then hesitated. She used to say thinking too much makes people angry. Jonathan considered that. "Sometimes thinking makes people uncomfortable," he said. "That doesn't mean it's wrong." She seemed satisfied with that and returned to her cereal. Later that morning, he drove her to school again. He noticed how she stayed close to him when they walked through the doors, how her grip tightened briefly before she let go. "I'll be here," he said. "Same time." She nodded and disappeared into the classroom. As he turned away, he caught a few curious looks from other parents. Whispers moved fast in their circles. Victoria Lane leaving suddenly was not something people would ignore. He welcomed it. Back at the house, his legal counsel arrived, followed by his head of security. The meeting was short, efficient. Options were laid out: civil action, criminal investigation, damage control. "She'll claim misunderstanding," his attorney said. "She'll say she was acting in your best interest." "She wasn't," Jonathan replied. The attorney nodded. "We can prove intent." "Do it," Jonathan said quietly. When they left, the house felt emptier but lighter. Jonathan walked through the rooms again, noticing details that had once blended into the background. A photograph missing from the hallway, a drawer left open in the guest room. Signs of departure. That afternoon, Lily came home with a drawing. She held it up proudly. "This is us," she said. The picture showed 3 figures, one tall, one small, one medium-sized with a big X drawn through it. Jonathan crouched beside her. "Who's that?" "You," she said, pointing to the tall one. "Me, and that's the person who doesn't live here anymore." He nodded. "That's right." She studied his face. "Is she gone forever?" "She won't be coming back here," he said. "Okay," Lily said, then added, "I like it better now." That night, Jonathan received another call. This time it wasn't Victoria. "Mr. Stone," a man said calmly. "This is Detective Hayes. We need to speak with you regarding Victoria Lane." Jonathan listened without interruption. "Yes," he said finally. "I'll cooperate fully." After the call ended, he sat at the kitchen table long after the lights had been turned off. He thought about how close he had come to dismissing Lily's fear. How easily he could have convinced himself that children exaggerated, that adults knew better. He thought about how often society believed that lie. Upstairs, Lily shifted in her sleep. He heard the faint sound through the monitor he had insisted on keeping, despite being told she was too old for it. He went to her room and stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. The steady rhythm of safety slowly returning. "You were right," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "And I should have listened sooner." As he turned away, his phone buzzed once more. A final message from an unknown number. "You're making a powerful enemy." Jonathan deleted it without responding. Power, he knew now, was not measured by who feared you. It was measured by who you protected when it mattered most. The news broke quietly at first. A short item in the business section. No headline, no photographs, just a carefully worded paragraph noting that an internal investigation had been opened regarding unauthorized access to proprietary information at Stone Industries. Names were not mentioned, motives were not speculated on. It was the kind of story most people skimmed and forgot before reaching the bottom of the page. Jonathan read it once, then folded the paper and set it aside. He knew better than to mistake silence for safety. That morning, Lily moved through the house with a new kind of caution. Not fear, Jonathan would have recognized that immediately, but awareness. She stayed closer to him as they ate breakfast. When he stood, she stood. When he paused, she looked up at his face, waiting for a signal she didn't yet know how to name. "You don't have school today," he told her gently. Her eyebrows drew together. "Am I sick?" "No," he said. "It's a day off just for us." She considered this carefully, then nodded. "Okay." They spent the morning doing things that would have seemed insignificant to anyone else. He helped her with a puzzle on the living room floor. They watered the plants together in the sunroom. When she spilled water on the tiles, she froze for a split second, eyes darting toward him. "It's all right," he said immediately, handing her a towel. "Nothing bad happens because of a mistake." She watched him wipe the floor, absorbing the words not as reassurance, but as a new rule of the world. Late morning, Jonathan's phone buzzed. This time, he answered. "Mr. Stone," Detective Hayes said. "We have reason to believe Miss Lane attempted to transfer a partial data set to an external account late last night." "Was she successful?" Jonathan asked. "No," Hayes replied. "The transfer was interrupted." Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. "Good. There's something else," the detective continued. "She contacted a third party shortly after leaving your residence. Someone with prior involvement in corporate coercion cases." Jonathan felt the edges of the day sharpen. "Not yet, but this may go beyond personal betrayal. We're advising caution." Jonathan glanced at Lily, who was kneeling on the floor nearby, carefully lining up puzzle pieces. "Understood," he said. "Keep me informed." When the call ended, he stayed still for a moment, weighing what to say and what to hold back. Lily looked up at him, sensing the shift. "Is something wrong again?" she asked. He knelt beside her. "Something complicated," he said. "But it's being handled." She nodded, then hesitated. "Are there more bad secrets?" Jonathan considered the question. "There are secrets in the world," he said. "But they don't get to live in this house." She seemed to accept that. That afternoon, his security team arrived without uniforms, without vehicles that drew attention. They moved quietly, methodically, checking systems, reinforcing protocols. Jonathan watched from the doorway, not interfering, but not distant either. He wanted Lily to see that safety was not invisible. It was built. One of the guards spoke to him in low tones. "We recommend limited movement for a few days." Jonathan nodded. "She stays with me." "Understood." When evening came, Lily sat on the steps outside, watching the sky turn orange and then deep blue. Jonathan joined her, handing her a glass of juice. "Dad," she said. "Yes. Victoria said people like us have to be careful because everyone wants what we have." Jonathan followed her gaze to the horizon. "Some people want things that aren't theirs," he said. "That's true, but that doesn't mean we live afraid." She kicked her feet gently against the step. She said being quiet keeps people safe. Jonathan looked at her then. Really looked. "Being honest keeps people safe," he said. "Being quiet only helps the wrong person." Lily nodded slowly as if turning the idea over in her mind. That night, after she was asleep, Jonathan sat in the study again. The laptop was open, but he wasn't reading documents. He was looking at a photograph on the corner of the desk. Lily on her first day of school, smiling uncertainly, trusting him to be where she needed him to be. His phone vibrated. A message. "No sender ID. You exposed her too soon." Jonathan typed back a single word. "No." The response came almost immediately. "This doesn't end quietly." Jonathan didn't reply. He powered down the laptop and turned off the light, leaving the room dark and still. Quiet, he knew now, was not peace. Peace came from choosing the right noise at the right moment. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep. He went to her room and stood by the door, listening to her breathing. Slow, even, safe. "For now." "You spoke up," he murmured softly, a promise meant more for himself than for her. "I won't waste that." As he turned away, Jonathan accepted what had been forming since the first midnight call. Victoria Lane had not been acting alone, and whoever had taught her to threaten with a smile would not stop simply because she was gone. The first sign that the situation was no longer contained came on a Tuesday morning. Jonathan noticed it not through alarms or messages, but through absence. Lily didn't finish her breakfast. She pushed the bowl away after a few spoonfuls and sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes drifting toward the hallway, then back to him. She wasn't afraid. She was listening. "Are you feeling sick?" Jonathan asked. She shook her head. "No." "Something on your mind?" Lily hesitated, then nodded. "I heard voices last night." Jonathan set his coffee down slowly. "Where?" "Outside." she said. Not in the house. By the gate. His body went still, though his face didn't change. What kind of voices? Men, Lily replied. They were talking quietly, like they didn't want anyone to hear. Did you hear what they said? She frowned, trying to remember. One of them said your name. Jonathan reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for telling me, he said. You did the right thing. Her shoulders eased just a little. After he walked her to school and watched her disappear inside, Jonathan didn't leave right away. He stayed in the car, eyes scanning the street, the parked vehicles, the ordinary rhythm of parents and children moving through their mornings. Nothing stood out. That too stood out. Back at the house, he called his head of security. I want full perimeter review, he said. Footage from last night, all angles. Already on it, the man replied. We saw movement near the outer fence around 2:10 a.m. No breach. Not yet, Jonathan said. By noon, the footage was on his screen. Two figures, faces obscured by darkness and distance, standing just beyond the property line, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid trespass. They stayed for 11 minutes. They didn't try to enter. They didn't need to. That afternoon, Jonathan received a call from his attorney. She's retained counsel, the attorney said. Aggressive. Expected, Jonathan replied. There's more, the attorney continued. They're floating a narrative. That Miss Lane was acting under pressure. That she feared for her safety. That your household environment was unstable. Jonathan smiled without humor. Because a child spoke up. Exactly, the attorney said. They'll imply she was manipulated by me. Jonathan finished. Yes. When the call ended, Jonathan stood at the window again, watching the grounds. He felt no panic, only clarity. This was how it worked. Undermine the child, undermine the parent, shift focus, blur responsibility. That evening, Lily was quiet again, but not withdrawn. She sat at the table drawing. Her crayons lined up neatly by color. What are you making? Jonathan asked. She held up the page. It showed a house drawn solid and square with thick lines around it. She had drawn small shapes, stick figures. Some with faces, some without. These are people who look, she said. Look at what? He asked. Our house, Lily replied. They don't come inside. Jonathan studied the drawing. How does that make you feel? She shrugged. I don't like being looked at. I don't either, he said. After dinner, as he tucked her into bed, Lily asked a question she'd been holding all day. Dad, yes. Did I make her angry? Jonathan paused. He chose his words carefully. You didn't make her angry, he said. You made her exposed. Lily blinked. Is that bad for her? For her, he said. Not for you. She thought about that, then nodded. Later that night, the phone rang again. This time, the number was blocked. Mr. Stone, a man's voice said, calm and unhurried. We should talk. Jonathan didn't ask who it was. About what? About Victoria Lane, the man said. And about Lily. Jonathan felt the air in the room shift. You don't get to say my daughter's name, he replied. A soft chuckle. You're emotional. That's understandable. But emotions make people careless. And threats make people visible, Jonathan said. Who are you? There was a pause then. Someone who fixes problems before they become public. You're too late, Jonathan said. On the contrary, the man replied. This is when it becomes interesting. The line went dead. Jonathan stood there for a long moment, phone still in his hand. He didn't need to guess what this was. He had seen versions of it before in boardrooms and courtrooms, wrapped in suits instead of shadows. Pressure, leverage, a test. He walked upstairs and checked on Lily. She was asleep, curled on her side, her breathing slow and even. He watched her for a full minute, committing the image to memory. Then he went back downstairs and made 3 calls. One to his legal team, one to federal investigators, and one to a person he hadn't spoken to in years. "I need you," he said when the call connected. There was a pause, then a familiar voice. "I was wondering when you'd stop pretending this was just business." "It's not," Jonathan said. "It's family." The voice on the other end grew serious. "Then we do this properly." When the call ended, Jonathan sat alone in the darkened study. The house quiet around him. Victoria Lane had been a door. What waited behind it was much larger, and this time he wouldn't allow anyone to whisper his child into silence again. The man Jonathan called arrived just before sunrise. There were no announcements, no security escorts walking him through the house. He came the way people who understood discretion always did, quietly, efficiently, without leaving a trace of importance behind him. Marcus Hale looked older than Jonathan remembered. The years had settled into his face, not as weakness, but as refinement. His hair had gone fully gray. His movements slower, but deliberate. He wore a plain coat, no tie, no badge, no visible authority. But when he spoke, the room seemed to listen. "You still live like a man who expects trouble," Marcus said, scanning the house with an appraising eye. "And you still show up when it matters," Jonathan replied. They sat at the kitchen table with untouched coffee between them. Outside, the morning light crept across the lawn, soft and deceptive. "Start from the beginning," Marcus said. Jonathan did. He told him about Lily's call, about Victoria, about the files, the men at the gate, the voice on the phone that had said Lily's name as if it were a bargaining chip. Marcus listened without interrupting, hands folded, eyes steady. When Jonathan finished, there was a long silence. "This isn't just corporate coercion," Marcus said finally. "It's grooming." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "That's what I thought. They test boundaries," Marcus continued. "They look for houses where children are taught to stay quiet, where adults are busy, distracted, convinced that danger always comes from outside." Jonathan exhaled slowly. "I won't let them near her." "You already did," Marcus said gently. "Once. That's enough for them to try again." Jonathan stood and paced the room. "Then tell me how this ends." Marcus looked at him carefully. "It doesn't end quickly, and it doesn't end clean, but it ends with light. That's the only thing these people can't survive." Upstairs, a soft footstep sounded on the stairs. Lily appeared at the edge of the room, still in her pajamas, rubbing one eye. She froze when she saw Marcus. Jonathan turned instantly. "Hey," he said, "you're up early." She nodded, then looked at Marcus. "Who's he?" Marcus didn't move. He waited. "This is an old friend," Jonathan said. "Someone who helps keep people safe." Lily studied Marcus for a long moment, then asked the question she always asked when she needed to understand something important. "Are you a good person?" Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "I try to be," he said honestly. She seemed to accept that. She walked to Jonathan's side and took his hand. Marcus watched the exchange carefully. "She's observant," he said quietly. "She had to be," Jonathan replied. They didn't talk about it further. That morning, Marcus walked the perimeter with the security team. He asked questions no one else had thought to ask. Not just where the cameras were, but why they were placed that way. Not just who had access, but who had been trusted without question. By midday, a clearer picture had formed. This wasn't Victoria's operation, Marcus said as they reviewed notes. She was a node, a facilitator. "And the men at the gate?" Jonathan asked. "Scouts," Marcus replied. "Pressure without escalation. They wanted to see how fast you reacted." Jonathan's mouth tightened. "They used Lily to measure me." "Yes," Marcus said. "And you failed their expectations." Jonathan looked up. "How so?" "They expected denial, delay, rationalization," Marcus said. "Instead, you acted immediately. You removed Victoria. You involved law enforcement. You changed patterns." Jonathan nodded slowly. "That makes you unpredictable," Marcus continued. And that makes you dangerous to them. That afternoon, Lily stayed close to Jonathan as he worked from home. She colored quietly at the desk while he reviewed documents, her presence grounding him more than she could ever know. At one point, she looked up. "Dad, yes, if bad people don't like light," she said carefully. "Why don't we just turn on all the lights?" Jonathan smiled despite himself. "That's exactly what we're doing." That night, the house didn't sleep, not from fear, but from readiness. Cameras were adjusted, protocols rewritten, names added to lists that hadn't existed before. Marcus made calls from the study, speaking in low tones to people whose voices carried authority. Without recognition, near midnight, Jonathan's phone rang again. Same blocked number. He answered this time. "You're escalating," the voice said. Calm, controlled, annoyed. "No," Jonathan replied. "I'm responding. You're putting a child at the center of a very adult conflict," the man said. "You did that," Jonathan shot back. "The moment you said her name." Silence stretched. "You think exposure protects you?" The man said. "It doesn't. It makes you a target." Jonathan's voice was ice. "Then aim carefully." The line went dead. Jonathan didn't move for a long time. Then he went upstairs and checked on Lily. She was asleep, one arm wrapped around a stuffed animal, the other curled beneath her pillow. He sat beside her bed and allowed himself, for just a moment, to feel the weight of what could have happened. What almost had. "I'm here," he whispered. "And I'm not going anywhere." Downstairs, Marcus watched the security feeds alone. "This is only the beginning," he murmured to himself. But for the first time since Victoria had entered Jonathan Stone's life, the beginning belonged to the right people. The first leak appeared online before noon. It wasn't dramatic. No headlines, no accusations, just a thread on a financial forum frequented by people who liked to feel smarter than the markets they failed to predict. An anonymous post, a question framed as speculation. "Has anyone noticed Stone Industries quietly pulling out of the West Bridge acquisition? Looks like internal instability. Possible leadership issue." Jonathan read it once, then handed the tablet to Marcus. "That's the opening move," Marcus said. "Not an attack, a probe. They're testing how fast it spreads." "And who repeats it?" Jonathan replied. By mid-afternoon, a business blog had picked it up. By evening, a cable news panel mentioned it in passing between segments on interest rates and foreign markets. Still nothing concrete, just uncertainty. Uncertainty was leverage. At home, Lily was doing homework at the dining table. She frowned at a math problem, erased it, then erased it again. "I don't like numbers," she said quietly. Jonathan looked up from his laptop. "Why not? They change," she replied. "You think you know the answer, but then it's wrong." Jonathan considered that. "Some numbers change," he said. "Some don't. The trick is knowing which ones matter." She nodded, not fully convinced, but reassured enough to keep working. Marcus watched them from the doorway. "She hears more than you think." "I know," Jonathan said. "That's why I don't lie to her." "Good," Marcus replied, "because they will." That night, the second move came. A call from a board member. Friendly, concerned, carefully vague. "We're just wondering if everything is stable on your end," the man said. "There's chatter." "There's always chatter," Jonathan replied. "Yes, but this feels coordinated." Jonathan smiled faintly. "It is." The silence on the other end told him enough. After the call, Jonathan stood in the kitchen, staring at the darkened backyard. Marcus joined him, arms crossed. "They're not coming for your money," Marcus said. "They're coming for your credibility." "And using Lily as the pressure point," Jonathan replied. "They'll never mention her directly," Marcus said. "That would cross a line too publicly, but they'll imply distraction, question judgment, suggest emotional compromise." Jonathan's voice was flat. "Because I'm a single father." "Yes," Marcus said, "and because she's not biologically yours." The words landed with controlled precision. Jonathan didn't flinch. Say it. They'll suggest instability in the home, Marcus continued. They'll say you're vulnerable to manipulation because you rescued a child and built your life around her. Jonathan turned to face him. She's not a weakness. I know, Marcus said. But they don't need truth. They need a story. That sounds plausible to people who already want an excuse. Upstairs, Lily laughed at something on her tablet. The sound cut through the tension like light through fog. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Then we don't play defense. Marcus raised an eyebrow. No, we go first, Jonathan said. The next morning, Jonathan did something he hadn't done in years. He told the truth publicly. Not all of it, not the parts that would endanger Lily, but enough. He released a statement. Calm, precise, acknowledging an internal security breach, confirming cooperation with federal authorities, reaffirming leadership and transparency, and then at the end, a single sentence that made Marcus nod in approval. As a father, I take personal responsibility for ensuring my home and my company are governed by the same principle. Trust must be earned, and silence is never acceptable when something feels wrong. It wasn't dramatic. It was devastating. The forums erupted. The tone shifted. Speculation turned to questions. Questions turned to scrutiny of Victoria Lane, of her access, of her sudden disappearance. By afternoon, the narrative had changed. Lily noticed anyway. You talked about us on TV. She said that evening, sitting cross-legged on the couch. About something important. Jonathan replied. About listening. Yes, she thought for a moment. That means you didn't ignore me. No, he said. I didn't. She smiled, small but certain. That night, the gate cameras picked up movement again, one figure this time, closer than before. Marcus and the security team watched the feed in silence as the man stopped just outside the property line. He didn't hide. He looked directly at the camera and raised his phone. Taking a picture. A message arrived seconds later on Jonathan's phone. You're forcing our hand. Jonathan typed back, good. He deleted the thread and powered off the phone. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, unaware of how many adults were now circling a truth spoken by a child. Jonathan stood at her door for a long moment before turning away. They had wanted quiet compliance. They had awakened something else entirely. The knock came at 6:12 a.m. Not loud, not urgent, just firm enough to announce intention. Jonathan was already awake. He crossed the foyer without haste, signaling to security with a glance before opening the door himself. Two federal agents stood on the step, credentials visible, posture respectful but immovable. Behind them, a dark sedan idled at the curb. Mr. Stone, the taller one said, I'm Agent Brooks. This is Agent Sanchez. We need to speak with you about an escalating situation involving Victoria Lane and several associated parties. Jonathan nodded. Come in. They moved into the living room, eyes scanning out of habit rather than suspicion. Marcus appeared from the hallway, coffee in hand, already aware of what this meant. We've intercepted communications suggesting an attempt to coerce you into reversing your public position, Brooks said. Financial pressure, reputation management, the usual methods. And Lily? Jonathan asked directly. Sanchez met his gaze. Indirect references only, but yes, she's part of the leverage calculus. Jonathan's expression didn't change. Then we're done talking hypotheticals. That's why we're here, Brooks said. We'd like to offer protective custody options. No, Jonathan replied immediately. Marcus raised a hand slightly. Let him finish. We're not suggesting relocation, Brooks clarified. We're suggesting coordination. You stay where you are. We control the variables you can't see. Jonathan considered that. And what do you need from me? Access, Sanchez said, to everything Victoria touched and a willingness to let this play out publicly if necessary. Jonathan exhaled slowly. She won't stop. No, Brooks agreed. Neither will the people behind her. Upstairs, a door creaked. Lily stood at the top of the stairs, hair still rumpled from sleep, her small hand gripping the railing. She looked down at the unfamiliar men, then at Jonathan. Are they police? She asked. Yes, Jonathan said gently. They're here to help. She thought about that, then nodded once, accepting the answer without fear. Okay. She went back to her room without another word. Sanchez watched her disappear. She's composed. She had to grow up fast, Jonathan said quietly. That ends now. The agents spent the next 2 hours reviewing systems, documents, timelines. Marcus filled in gaps. Jonathan answered questions precisely without embellishment. At 9:30, Lily came downstairs dressed for school. Jonathan knelt to straighten her jacket. There will be people around today, he told her. That doesn't mean something bad is happening. She studied his face. It means you're being careful. Yes, he said, very careful. She nodded, satisfied. The drive to school felt longer than usual. Jonathan noticed every car that lingered too long, every pedestrian who turned their head. He parked, walked Lily to the door, and waited until she was inside before returning to the car. His phone buzzed as soon as he sat down. A video. He didn't open it immediately. He drove away first, pulled over 3 blocks down, then pressed play. Victoria appeared on the screen, seated in what looked like a tasteful office, hair perfect, eyes carefully tired. I never wanted this to be public, she said softly. But I can't stay silent while my character is destroyed. Jonathan watched without blinking. I cared deeply for Jonathan, Victoria continued. And for Lily. But the environment became unpredictable. I feared for my safety and for hers. Jonathan closed the video before it finished. That's the narrative, Marcus said when he returned home and relayed it. Victimhood, concern, implied instability. Using a child as moral cover, Jonathan replied. Exactly. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Carefully edited, sympathetic commentary, the words unstable and emotional began appearing with uncomfortable frequency. Jonathan said nothing. That evening, Lily asked the question he'd been waiting for. Why is she on the TV? She asked, sitting cross-legged on the rug. She's telling her version of the story, Jonathan said. Is it true? No, he said simply. Then why do people listen? Jonathan thought for a moment. Because it's easier than asking harder questions. She frowned. That's not fair. No, he agreed. It isn't. After Lily went to bed, Jonathan sat with Marcus in the dark study. They're pushing towards something, Marcus said. A public confrontation or a private ultimatum. And if I don't bend, they escalate. Jonathan nodded. Then we make sure the escalation backfires. At 11:47 p.m., the message arrived. Final offer. Walk away quietly. Custody arrangements can be discussed. Jonathan stared at the screen, his hand steady. He typed a response. Any future attempt to reference my daughter will be treated as a criminal act. He sent it. Then he forwarded the message to the agents. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, unaware that a line had just been drawn that could not be erased. Jonathan stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening to the quiet. They had tried fear. They had tried shame. Now they would try force, and he was ready. The escalation came disguised as procedure. Jonathan learned this that afternoon when his attorney called with a tone that was careful enough to be alarming. There's been a filing, she said. Emergency petition. Family court. Jonathan closed his eyes slowly. On what grounds? Concern for the child's emotional welfare, she replied. They're requesting a temporary review of guardianship. For a brief moment, the room seemed to tilt, not from panic, but from the sheer audacity of it. She has no standing, Jonathan said. Not legally, the attorney agreed. But filings like this aren't about winning. They're about creating doubt. Jonathan said nothing. He was already thinking several steps ahead. By the time Lily came home from school, the house was no longer simply guarded. It was observed. Unmarked vehicles sat at respectful distances. Phones rang quietly in other rooms. Conversations happened behind closed doors. Lily noticed anyway. Why are there so many cars? She asked as Jonathan helped her hang up her coat. Because some people don't know when to stop, he said. And other people are here to make sure they do. She considered that, then nodded. Okay. But later, as she colored at the table, she spoke again. Dad, yes, if people say mean things about you, she said carefully. Does that make them true? Jonathan leaned back in his chair. No, he said, but it can make them loud. She frowned. I don't like loud lies. Neither do I, he thought. That evening, Marcus briefed him in the study. They're setting up a narrative where intervention looks reasonable, Marcus said. Not dramatic, concerned, precautionary. Using the system as a weapon, Jonathan replied. Yes, Marcus said, and the system doesn't like being accused of that. Jonathan stared at the wall for a long moment. Then we don't accuse it. We educate it. At 9 p.m., the agents returned. We expected this move, Agent Brooks said. They won't get custody, but they can force interviews, evaluations, delays. And Lily? Jonathan asked. She won't be removed, Brooks said firmly. But she may be spoken to. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Only with me present. That can be arranged. Upstairs, Lily was brushing her teeth, humming softly to herself. Jonathan watched from the doorway, the normalcy of the moment grounding him. Dad, she said around the toothbrush. Are you in trouble? He knelt beside her. No, he said, I'm in a disagreement. With who? With people who don't like being told no. She spat into the sink and wiped her mouth. You tell me no sometimes. Yes, he said, and how do you feel about that? She shrugged. I don't like it, but I know why you do it. He smiled faintly. That's the difference. Later, after she was asleep, Jonathan opened a locked drawer in the study. Inside were documents he rarely touched. Old ones, adoption records, psychological evaluations, letters from teachers, doctors, social workers, a life documented not as an asset, but as a child. He organized them carefully, not for defense, but for clarity. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed again. A new message. Unknown number. You're putting her through unnecessary stress. End this and it goes away. Jonathan stared at the words, feeling no temptation, no hesitation. He typed back, you are the stress, and you will not be near her again. This time, the reply didn't come. The next morning, the interview request arrived officially. Neutral language, soft deadlines, the appearance of fairness. Jonathan read it, then folded the letter and placed it on the table. Okay, he said quietly. Marcus looked up. Okay, we cooperate, Jonathan said. Fully, transparently, on our terms. That afternoon, Lily sat with him in the garden, pulling weeds from the soil with small, determined hands. Why do people try to take things that aren't theirs? She asked suddenly. Jonathan thought of Victoria, of the men at the gate, of systems bent just enough to harm. Sometimes, he said, because they think no one will stop them. She nodded. You stop them. I try, he said. She smiled, dirt smudged on her cheek. I like that. As the sun dipped low, Jonathan felt the weight of what lay ahead settle fully into place. This was no longer just about exposure or leverage. It was about precedent, about whether a child's quiet courage could be twisted into a liability, about whether truth, once spoken, could be made to disappear through paperwork and polite concern. He looked at Lily, kneeling in the grass, completely unaware of how many adults were arguing over the shape of her life. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would not allow the system to become another whisper telling her to be quiet. Not now, not ever. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning. Not at the house, not at a courthouse. A neutral office in a low-rise building with beige walls and carefully chosen furniture meant to feel comforting without offering warmth. The kind of place where difficult conversations were softened by neutral colors and polite smiles. Jonathan arrived early. Lily sat beside him, feet not quite touching the floor, hands folded neatly in her lap. She wore a blue sweater she liked because it felt quiet. Her word for things that didn't draw attention. "You remember what we talked about?" Jonathan asked gently. She nodded. "I just tell the truth." "That's right," he said. "And if you don't know an answer, I can say I don't know." "Yes," he said. "That's an honest answer, too." The door opened and a woman stepped in. Mid-40s, professional, but not cold. She introduced herself as Ms. Parker. Her voice calm, practiced, not unkind. "Good morning, Lily," she said, crouching slightly to be closer to eye level. "I'm going to ask you a few questions today. There are no right or wrong answers." Lily looked at Jonathan. He nodded once. "I know," Lily said softly. "Just the truth." Ms. Parker smiled faintly and gestured toward the inner room. "Whenever you're ready." Jonathan stayed where he was. That had been negotiated carefully. Lily walked in without hesitation, her small steps steady. Jonathan watched the door close behind her, then forced himself to sit back, to wait, to trust the very thing he had taught her. Time stretched. 10 minutes, then 20. Jonathan focused on his breathing, on the weight of his feet against the floor. He reminded himself that this was not a trial, that Lily was not alone, that silence here was procedural, not punitive. Still, every instinct in him strained against the waiting. Inside the room, Lily sat with her hands folded, answering questions the way she had been taught, but also the way she felt. "She used to tell me not to wake my dad," Lily said when asked about Victoria. "Even when I was scared." Ms. Parker's pen paused briefly. "She said good girls don't make trouble," Lily continued. "And that dads don't like kids who lie." "Did your dad ever say that?" Ms. Parker asked. Lily shook her head. "He says I can always tell him. And when you did, he came home right away." The pen paused again. "Did anyone tell you what to say today?" Ms. Parker asked gently. Lily frowned, thinking carefully. "No. Dad said I should say what really happened, even if it's quiet." Ms. Parker nodded slowly. When Lily returned to the waiting room, Jonathan stood immediately. Lily walked straight to him and slipped her hand into his. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You did perfectly," he said, his voice steady, though his chest felt tight. Ms. Parker followed them out a few minutes later. "Mr. Stone," she said, professional but direct. "Thank you for your cooperation." Jonathan met her eyes. "And there is no basis for further action regarding guardianship," she said. "The petition will be dismissed." Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter. They got into the car and Lily buckled herself in, then looked up at Jonathan with quiet seriousness. "Am I in trouble anymore?" she asked. "No," Jonathan said. "You're safe." She nodded, satisfied. That afternoon, the response came swiftly. Victoria's legal team withdrew the petition without comment. The business blog shifted tone again, this time more cautious. Words like overreach and miscalculation began to appear. Marcus called just before dinner. "They misjudged the optics," he said. "A calm child telling the truth doesn't fit their narrative." "Good," Jonathan replied, but he didn't relax. That evening, as Lily worked on a puzzle in the living room, Jonathan sat nearby, reviewing a report Marcus had sent over. Names, connections, financial trails that didn't belong to Victoria but passed through her. She hadn't been the architect. She had been the doorway. "Dad," Lily said suddenly. "Yes. Why do grown-ups lie if it makes things worse?" Jonathan set the paper aside. "Sometimes they think lying gives them control." She placed a puzzle piece carefully. It didn't work. No, he agreed. It didn't. That night, after Lily was asleep, Jonathan stood by the window again. The property was quiet. No figures by the gate. No cars lingering too long. But quiet no longer fooled him. His phone buzzed. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a message from Agent Brooks. "We're moving forward. Charges likely. You did the right thing holding the line." Jonathan read it once, then looked upstairs. Lily had spoken softly, and the world had shifted. He understood now what his enemies had never accounted for. Truth didn't need volume. It needed witnesses willing to stand still long enough to hear it. As he turned off the lights and headed upstairs, Jonathan felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not relief, not victory, but resolve sharpened by clarity. They had lost this round, and they knew it. But the story wasn't finished yet. The arrest warrant was signed on a Friday. Not announced, not leaked, just processed quietly, the way serious things often were. Jonathan learned about it from Agent Brooks in a brief call that contained no celebration and no reassurance. "She's in custody," Brooks said. "Victoria Lane. Fraud, unauthorized data access, conspiracy to coerce. We're still building on the rest." "And the people behind her?" Jonathan asked. "Watching," Brooks replied, "waiting to see how far this goes." Jonathan understood that language well. That afternoon, Lily came home with a note from her teacher tucked carefully into her backpack. She handed it to him without comment, watching his face as he read. "Lily has been more open in class lately, more willing to speak. She shared something thoughtful today during reading circle. I wanted you to know." Jonathan folded the note slowly. "Your teacher says you spoke up." Lily shrugged, suddenly shy. "It was just a story." "What kind of story?" "One where someone was scared," she said. "But they told anyway." Jonathan smiled. "Small and genuine. That sounds like an important story." That evening, the first reporter showed up at the end of the drive. Not bold enough to approach, not discreet enough to disappear. Security handled it. The message was clear and polite. No comment, no access. Not now. Lily noticed the lights from the camera van flicker briefly through the trees. "Are they looking at us again?" she asked. "Yes," Jonathan said, "but they don't get to decide who we are." She seemed to accept that. "Okay." Later, when Lily was asleep, Jonathan sat with Marcus in the study reviewing the latest developments. "They're going to pivot," Marcus said. "Distance themselves from Victoria, paint her as unstable, a lone actor." "Sacrifice her," Jonathan replied. "Yes," Marcus said, "to protect the structure." Jonathan leaned back, fingers steepled. "Then we make sure the structure is visible." Marcus studied him. "You're thinking bigger." "I'm thinking necessary," Jonathan replied. The next morning, Jonathan did something no one expected. He agreed to speak, not to a panel, not to a hostile interviewer. He chose a single journalist. Older, respected, known for patience rather than provocation. The interview took place in the study, the camera positioned carefully to avoid Lily's space. She was at a friend's house, unaware of the weight being carried in the room below. "I won't discuss an ongoing investigation," Jonathan said calmly to the journalist. "But I will say this. Silence is often mistaken for maturity." "It isn't. It's fear. Taught early and reinforced often." The journalist didn't interrupt. "When a child tells the truth quietly," Jonathan continued, "and the system tries to drown it out with procedure and pressure. The problem isn't the child, it's us." The piece aired that evening, measured, thoughtful. No accusations, just reflection. It landed harder than any confrontation could have. By Monday, the conversation had changed. Not about Jonathan's leadership, not about instability. About systems that discouraged children from speaking, about adults who confused authority with infallibility. Lily noticed.